This is the Greg Bedard Patriots Podcast with Nick Cattles.
We've got a lot to talk about. Busy last few days for the Patriots. Greg, let's dive right in with the trade of Shaq Mason. Mason goes to the Bucs. This happened yesterday for a 5th-round pick. Your thoughts on the deal? And I especially want to get your thoughts on Mason because you're one of the only guys that I saw tweeting out yesterday that thought Mason did not have as good of a year as you might have thought.
Yeah, what's interesting, Nick, is that, sort of because I'm a one-man band over at BSJ, a lot of, you get busy with certain things. And, with the Patriots, it's been a busy offseason from, staff and front office defections, Tom Brady retiring, combine, stuff like that. Like some stuff like year review stuff got sort of pushed off for me. So I was trying to catch up right before free agency because I like to go over my numbers just one last time to sort of, hey, take a sort of 1,000-yard look at things. And Sunday night I was going through I decided for the first time, everybody knows that listens to this, I do sort of my own sort of plus-minus system as I'm evaluating film. So this year, I don't know why it just occurred to me this year, but I was like, why don't I put those numbers for each player from each game onto my spreadsheet? And then sort of, maybe that'll give me a bigger picture. So I started doing that for the offense, and I was going to publish it Sunday night, but somebody decided to unretire. So I put it on, so I put it on the back burner. But one of the things when I looked at the offense, one of the things that stood out to me was a couple of different things. One, hey, maybe people are being too hard on Nelson Aguilar. Maybe it was just sort of circumstances that dictated that he wasn't productive last year. I didn't think he was bad, and my numbers sort of backed that up when I looked at it, even though he just didn't have a lot of numbers. The other thing that jumped out to me, Nick, and I actually wrote this, and of course I didn't publish it, so I look like an idiot, but I was underwhelmed by Shaq Mason's numbers when I went back through it last year. And I came to the conclusion, is he worth the $10 million that they're going to pay him? Is he still on the upside of his career like he was when the Patriots gave him a big money extension? And what I found was, through the Falcons game, I had him for a net minus 23. Now, that sounds awful. But offensive line, in my plus-minus system, every position group is sort of different. Offensive linemen have a lot more opportunities to have negative plays than, say, a running back who, outside of not picking the right hole, drops, fumbles, penalties, not a whole lot of opportunities for minus plays. So they're always sort of in the plus. In my rankings, offensive linemen are always in a negative, but negative 23 in 7 games, that's not good, and especially for a guy that the way he was getting paid. Now, I will say, in the final 7, that was 9 games, he was a minus 23. In the final 7 games, he was only a minus 4. So in my rating system, Shaq Mason was really good in the final 7 games. He was below average in the first 9 games. So that just led me to ask the question, could the Patriots look to move on from Shaq Mason? Do they think is he going to be the guy who played in the second half of the season? Or do they think this is sort of what we're going to get out of him? And so the Patriots decided to move on. Now, I don't mind that they traded him. I don't love the return, a 5th-round pick.
Yep.
It sort of goes along with, the way the Patriots have dealt with things, whether it's Joe Thuney, Tom Brady, J.C. Jackson, now Shaq Mason. They're not getting much in return for these guys. Guys they have developed, guys who have been good players, guys who you think have value around the league. Actually, we know they have value around the league. And so, to me, I'm sort of, underwhelmed at the return that they got. I understand why they dealt him. I'm not up in arms about it because I do think guard is one of those positions that you can figure out, and, we can talk about some of the options for them, but I didn't hate the deal. I didn't hate trading Mason. I didn't love the return.
You stole all my thunder. Pretty much everything you just said. I didn't grade Mason's season. And by the way, if you're watching this video and I keep looking away, it's not because I want to see the new trim. Greg Bedard, I'm trying to stay away from looking at him because he's lost over 90 pounds. If you haven't heard, it's because I'm on Twitter making sure we don't miss anything. So I'm going to keep looking over to the other direction. That's why. But, I didn't grade Shaq's season. But yes, guard is not a tough position to find. You can find guys. The Patriots have done it over and over and over again, finding interior offensive linemen with mid-round, late-round, undrafted free agents. Well, maybe not at that level he was at his best, obviously, but you can find a guy. You've lost Karras and Mason. I would imagine that Owenu will be one of those guys who fills a guard spot. I think they'll be able to find somebody, but the issue to me was the return, and I pretty much agree with everything you said. A fifth-round pick for Mason seems low, and you start to look at these trades. Gilmore, of course, they had a lot less leverage with Gilmore, but Gilmore is a question.
Yep.
The handling of guys, Tooney, all of that stuff kind of comes back and bites you here, but I'm not going to freak out. The league year hasn't even started yet while we record this. They've got plenty of time to help the offensive line. What's next, though, do you think? I mean, I saw, looking up front, Greg, I saw the name La'el Collins, and there was a report yesterday, I believe it was from Andrew Callahan, saying that the Patriots had at least dug into the idea of Collins from the Cowboys. Collins is looking to leave Dallas. Is that an option? Does that make sense to you, bringing Collins in and then maybe, making some more moves up front? Yeah,
it's interesting. And I think I saw CBS had a report, along those same lines today. So maybe there's some fire where there's smoke. I have not heard that. It's possible Dallas is looking to move him. So let's just deal with the offensive line like present day right now. If the Patriots had to line up tomorrow, a lot of it hinges on how they see Owenu. He was very good as a rookie at tackle. They kicked him inside at guard last year. He was not as good. He eventually lost his spot to Ted Karras inside. So in my mind, until he proves otherwise, he's a tackle. So I have him penciled in as the right tackle. I have Yasir Duran as a guy they went out and traded for last year. He played a little bit of tackle. I give him a chance at guard. Andrews, of course, is at center. I have, Justin Herron right now, who I thought came on at the end of last year. Again, another mostly tackle. Try him out at guard, see if he can play guard a little bit, win at left tackle. Now, if they do make a move for Collins or another left tackle, say, like a guy like Nate Solder is out there. I mean, and while I don't, I'm not over the moon about Nate Solder anymore. At least they have some familiarity with him. Maybe they look at a guy who they can plug in there. But say they get a left tackle, then I think things make a little bit more sense, Nick. I think if they get a left tackle, and Collins has been mostly a right tackle, but he can play on the left side. And let's also not forget about Trent Brown, who I don't think they were enamored with, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't bring him back if it was cheap. But just let's say they get a left tackle. Then all of a sudden you kick Wynn inside to left guard. You have Andrews. You have Durant, Herron, a draft pick. There's been Tooney, Mason are guards that started right away for the Patriots. You plug in, you draft a right guard, which is a little bit easier than left guard for the Patriots. You plug a rookie in at right guard. You have Owenu at right tackle. Suddenly, okay, you have a decent offensive line. You have a pretty good offensive line if everybody is up to par. So, tackle would be something I would be looking to upgrade because I don't think Isaiah Wynn was good enough last year. If you're not just going to trade him and save his $10 million, then the best option might just be to kick him inside.
And it's interesting because Wynn is at $10 million and Collins is pretty much at $10 million. You wonder if that's part of the math here. Do you try to move on from Isaiah Wynn? Do you bring in Collins? You replace the salary with the salary. You get a pick for Isaiah Wynn. And then that gives you another shot at finding an offensive lineman to help you if that's where you want to go. It's just when I look at the past, two things that don't necessarily freak me out about Bill Belichick when it comes to player evaluation. He's done a really good job with offensive line and cornerback. I'm not telling people to not freak out about J.C. Jackson, not to be concerned about the secondary. We'll get into that later. But if I have to wait to see how a position falls together, offensive line is one of those positions. I feel like they can figure it out. Cornerback will be more challenging, but look at the track record. Belichick's done a really good job at those two spots. So I think they'll have a plan. Let's move to the next piece here. Winovich for Mack Wilson. That trade happened. What do you think?
How long have we been talking about trading Chase Winovich?
Forever.
I mean, it's another late move by Bill Belichick. I mean, I don't know why this didn't happen a year ago and clear the decks, let Josh Uche play a little bit more, Ronnie Perkins, like whatever. It goes along with the lines of, guys in the past that I've said, like, all right, they need to move on from Landon Roberts, Deron Harmon, and they end up doing the year after I say it. But, Chase Winovich, that pick, complete waste. It was a complete waste of a third-round pick. It's either they misidentified like what he could do. I mean, they didn't know that he couldn't set the edge, or did they not develop him well enough, which outside linebacker, which now Uche's there and Ronnie Perkins, that's Steve Belichick's position. What's the deal at edge? Why can't they develop any guys internally? Why do they have to go get Matthew Judon and Kyle Van Noy and guys? Why can't they develop these, relatively high draft picks? But look, Winovich hasn't done anything here. I think he's a good player. I think he's good at what he does. Sub-pass rusher. I would have liked to have seen them at some point say, hey, what is he good at? He's good at running around and going to the ball and flying to the ball. Why don't we stand him up and try him at inside linebacker? Maybe it takes there. Clay Matthews did sort of the same thing in Green Bay, and that worked. I just did not like the lack of imagination with the Chase Winovich career. I think that the Patriots did a poor job developing him or at least using him. I thought they kept him on the roster too long. But I will say this. Mack Wilson, who they got from Alabama, 5th round pick. Winovich was a 3rd round pick, same draft, 2019. Mack Wilson out of Alabama. I liked Mack Wilson out of Alabama. I think he has the potential to be a good player. I think he has the potential to be a starter here, maybe a little bit of an upgrade on Juwan Bentley, a little bit faster than Bentley, same type of player. But we'll have to see. There have been some, he went later in the draft. At Alabama, he went against Nick Saban's advice, which was stay in school for another year. He pissed off some people there about that. There's always been questions about his attitude a little bit, which led to him, being benched basically in Cleveland his last year. I think there's a player there. The Patriots are just going to have to pull it out. But I like the player. I do. And I think he helps.
I liked him at Alabama. I like him as a player as well. He might not be as much of a downhill thumper as Bentley because he's not as big, but he's going to help them in coverage. And we've talked about that against tight ends, against running backs. He can at least, help on tight ends downfield, down seam. He's athletic. He makes plays on the football when the football's around him. So I think if you get a little bit more athletic, that's what I wanted on the second level. I don't mind it. Winovich, he just can't set the edge. And we said it 1,000 times. The Patriots want more from their edge players. So he was going to move along at some point. Did they misutilize him? Probably. They could have used him better, as you mentioned. Wilson, more athletic. He's smaller than Bentley. I don't know if he's going to thump downhill as much as Bentley does, but he can cover. He can cover tight ends. He can cover running backs. He can get downfield. He makes plays on the football when the football's around him. He made a number of very impressive plays on the ball when he was at Alabama. So if you wanted to get more athletic, if you wanted to have more coverage from your second level, I don't know if he's going to go sideline to sideline as much, but he's somebody who's going to help them athletically, which I think was a must for this football team. So I don't mind the deal. You weren't going to get much out of Winovich. I think Winovich, by the way, will be one of those players. He'll go to Cleveland. He'll be better. He'll be a better fit. He'll do more, and people will say, oh, how did the Patriots get rid of him? Mm-hmm. Again, it's all about the scheme and what they want. So up to this point, we've got the Shaq Mason trade. We have the Winovich trade. We have Slater coming back. We have James White coming back. We have Brian Hoyer coming back. We have Nick Folk coming back. We have Devin McCourty coming back, which I thought was a necessity with J.C. Jackson out of town. Overall, Greg, your reaction to what they've done so far and what their approach is, and maybe this idea that they could be protecting some comp picks.
Yeah, look, it's been underwhelming, but I'm not alarmed. I mean, I didn't expect them to be free spenders. I'm hoping that come 4 o'clock today and the official start of free agency, I'm hoping we're sort of back to Patriots cloak and dagger. We don't know what they're doing. I mean, the trade sort of came out of nowhere.
Right.
There were no hints about that. Maybe, I would like to see the Patriots maybe. It seems, Nick, and let me start here, that, I don't know how much fans are familiar out there, but, there's a formula for the compensatory pick. So, sort of the level that you lose free agents and what they get paid, as long as you don't sign someone in the same neighborhood, then you'll get a comp pick. And so, J.C. Jackson's going to get you a very high comp pick, which is a sandwich pick between the third and fourth rounds next year. But to cash in on that, then you can't sign somebody else who's in the same neighborhood, which is why they got nothing for Joe Thuney. They let Joe Thuney walk, and then they signed $8 billion free agents last year. So there's no comp picks for the Patriots this year. Right. I think if I had to guess, I think that the Patriots seem like they don't want to outlay a lot of signing bonus and stuff like that like they did last year. It seems to me that they're more open to trading guys, which if you acquire guys via trade doesn't affect compensatory picks, and you also aren't paying a signing bonus. They just get paid what's left on their contract or you renegotiate. So there's no big, if you sign Allen Robinson, then you're going to have to pay him probably a $30 million signing bonus or what have you. Whereas if you trade for Robbie Anderson, then you're only paying him his base salary, which is $10 million a year. So it makes a little bit more financial sense. If I had to guess, the Patriots are being conservative. They're open to more trades, like a Robbie Anderson, Lael Collins, that sort of thing. And I think that they're looking to start to recoup some of these picks for the guys that they've been losing. And so I think they're taking a conservative approach. I'm hoping that there's one splash move, possibly like an Allen Robinson, who there's, if you're hoping the Patriots get him, there's been no news on him at all. Yeah. So no news on Allen Robinson and the way the Patriots sort of operate. That would be good news. You would think it would have leaked by now, but I'm hoping they make one splash pick for a receiver. It looks like my dreams of a really good slot receiver are gone. They're all the good ones in free agency are gone. Yeah. Not sure why they wouldn't have been on Braxton Berrios. It's not like he broke the bank or anything. So, but that's where I see the Patriots right now. They're going to look to make strategic trades and sort of fill out the roster with sort of the second tier free agents, whoever's left and that sort of thing.
I'm glad you brought up the Robinson thing because I've been having the same thought. There's been zero word about Robinson outside of Matthew Judon, who just tweeted literally 4 minutes ago at Allen Robinson and Chandler Jones, a gif of the Godfather saying, I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse. Chandler Jones, Tyrann Mathieu, Allen Robinson, there are some big names that there really hasn't been much going on. And so it's interesting to see what's going to happen with Robinson. The Patriots, obviously, it's been reported that the Patriots were interested in Robinson going back to last season. And then, of course, the Bears decided to franchise tag him. So that kind of stopped the talk. Mm-hmm. But Robinson is such a great fit. I mean, he's the guy I think they believe N'Keal Harry at his best would be. The contested catches downfield, the big target in the red zone, that kind of guy that will grab it with his mitts and pull it away from traffic. And I happen to have a really good friend, one of my best friends in Virginia when I lived there, diehard Chicago fan from Chicago. So I watched more Bears football than I wanted to, but I've seen Allen Robinson, and I'll tell you, people, if you look at his numbers, you might not be wowed in some cases. Watch this dude play. I mean, this dude, you want to talk about unbelievable hands. You want to talk about competing. You want to talk about not worried about taking a hit and gutting through some things. I love myself some Allen Robinson. It'll be interesting to see if, the quiet matches the quiet and he ends up in New England somehow, some way.
Yep.
It'll be fascinating to see what they do. I do think the Shaq Mason trade is interesting. Maybe something else pops up here because of that trade. I don't think they make that trade just to make that trade. Terrence Mitchell signed, cornerback, vet, played a lot of zone from what I read in Houston last year. Are they done at corner, Greg?
You would hope not, but it's possible. I mean, at least they have guys between, Miles Bryant, Jalen Mills, Jonathan Jones will be back, Shaun Wade, and now Mitchell. They could be done. They could say, maybe they have high hopes for Shaun Wade. They could draft a guy. But my question sort of with cornerback, Nick, is, going on what they have now and who they let go in J.C. Jackson, which I absolutely hated because he got $20 million guaranteed the first 2 years. Why not tag him at 17.3? That's the going rate. Another move that I hate. But considering what they have, how they played last year, how it was most effective until the last half of the season in terms of zone coverage, and what they have now at cornerback, which now this Terrence Mitchell signing, I swear to God, Nick, I feel like I'm back in 2011. It's like Sterling Moore and Antoine Molden and Phillip Adams. Like, that's what it feels like. And so I wouldn't be surprised if that's the way that they go. But if they do that, it's time to bone up on the pass rush, because we saw it last year. Matthew Judon got shut down, didn't play well the second half of the season. They couldn't stop a nosebleed. Yes, I have high hopes for Josh Uche. Yes, I have high hopes for Ronnie Perkins. But go get some street free agent, some veteran, outside linebacker, edge type of guy like a Zadarius Smith or Justin Houston or somebody like that to beef up the pass rush. Because if you're going to play, we saw it last year, Nick, and we talked about it all year, even before they went down the tubes. If you play a lot of zone coverage, you have to have a good pass rush. Because if you don't get to the quarterback, they have all day. They'll pick you apart. That's what Josh Allen did to them in the last 2 meetings. And so, yes, they could be done. If they are done, time to beef up the pass rush.
What interests me is where do they go scheme-wise? And, they've got Mitchell now, who's more of a zone guy. They played more zone last year than we've seen them play. I don't think they're going to go straight up zone all the time. That's ridiculous.
Right.
There's still a lot of man. But if they also go a little smaller at linebacker, that's another thought, right? If you go smaller at linebacker, that could also feed into zone coverage. So bringing Wilson in, signing Mitchell, letting J.C. Jackson walk, it's very interesting to see what they're planning defensively. Of course, Mayo said towards the end of last year, we need to get faster and all that and more athletic. So we'll see if this continues. And if it does, we have to start thinking a lot about zone and what this defense is actually going to look like schematically. All right, so options for the Patriots we'll get to in a minute. First, let's look at what they need. This is what I've got written down, Greg. Cornerback, obviously.
Yep.
Offensive
That's
line.
my number one need. Yep.
I've got cornerback, offensive line, linebacker, and wide receiver. Those are my 4 top needs.
Yeah, we're pretty close. I mean, I have number one cornerback, and Mitchell is not that, or at least I hope he's not that. You're hoping that, who knows, Shaun Wade pops and he's that guy. But number one cornerback, that could happen in the free agency or draft. Middle linebacker, like Miles Jack is out there. There's a street free agent where it doesn't factor into compensatory picks. I assume he's going to be very popular on the free agent market, but that's sort of like the ideal guy. You put Miles Jack with Mack Wilson and Cam McGrone and Raekwon McMillan, all of a sudden you've transformed into an athletic linebacking core.
Please give me Jack. If they get Miles Jack, I'll be happy with that.
I have X receiver, a boundary receiver. To replace Nelson Aguilar, if they can get somebody like an Allen Robinson, and we'll mention a few more names here, then, I'm trying to trade Nelson Aguilar back to the Raiders and McDaniels and Ziegler, who obviously signed off on him when they signed him last year. He really popped under Edgar Bennett, who McDaniels retained as Raiders receivers coach. And then I have nose tackle is next. I want better than Devon Godchow. If I got to move Godchow to end, so be it. And then number 5 would be my slot receiver, and then left edge, as we talked about with beefing up the pass rush. So that's sort of where I see the needs. If people want to go over to BSJ, you can see my whole depth chart, my whole needs list. All that stuff is available over there.
And just to throw a name out there, and this is going to continue to happen now over the next few hours. Of course, we're doing this live. So, when you finally see this, things have already happened most likely. But as I'm looking on Twitter, Eric Flowers has been released by the Commanders. Now, Flowers was a disaster in New York.
Yeah.
And then they moved him up front, though. They moved him, and he played pretty well. They moved him out of tackle. They put him at guard, and he was cut. He was making about $10 million a year or whatever it was. So, that's just a name. And you're going to see more offensive linemen, I think, released. You're going to see a lot of other guys cut because teams got to get under the cap. They've got to get to that number. So we'll see if more names pop up here, offensive line, in those positions of need. The salary cap situation, Greg, they're about $12 million under. They can create more room, though. Do you think they'll do that as we get closer to this deadline? Do you think they'll look to create more room by possibly restructuring Judon and doing other things?
Well, if they do that, then we'll know that they're up to something big. Normally, the Patriots, don't really like to maneuver contracts unless they absolutely have to. So if the situation presents itself where, like, say they need to extend themselves a little bit for like an Allen Robinson, then I think they would quickly do, Matthew Judon. I do think that we'll see some, possible releases here coming up. A guy like, not Dietrich Wise, but I wouldn't be shocked. You know how I feel about him. But Lawrence Guy would save you about $3 million if released. Jake Bailey, there's been a lot of talk about him. He would save you almost $4 million if you release him. Henry Anderson is a guy who I really liked, a guy as a depth piece, but he would save you about $1.5 million. So those are some, as we get closer to the new league year here, we could start to see some of those maneuvers. And if you see the Patriots start to, restructure Matthew Judon and Hunter Henry and guys like that, they're up to something and they're looking to pounce.
All right, let's talk about options, realistic options. Wide receiver, Allen Robinson, Juju, Jarvis Landry, MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, AJ Green, D-Jax, Deshaun Jackson, and Robbie Anderson. Now, AJ Green, D-Jax, 33, 35 years old.
That's why I put them on there.
Respectively. And yeah.
Given the Patriots free agency to this point, how old are you, Cattles? They might be calling up you. It's all the 30-somethings for crying out loud.
It's the over 30 club. Anderson would actually, as we all know, be a trade, and they had talked to Carolina. It'll be interesting to see if Carolina brings in Deshaun Watson. Sounds like the Saints are leading that brigade as of right now. To me, Allen Robinson is my number one. I would put Landry at 2. I would put Juju at 3. I'm afraid of what MVS is going to get on this market. He's not a $12 million a year player. How do you rank these guys, Greg?
So, I'm in favor of Robinson for all the reasons that you've said. I think he's a true number one. He's been in that position. He's been productive in sort of crap situations. So I think that he would be really good for Mac Jones. I'm not a big Juju Smith-Schuster guy. I used to be, but he sort of fell off in Pittsburgh. I don't know. Maybe him and Roethlisberger had a bad relationship. I don't know. But all of a sudden he disappeared, and I know that because he was on my fantasy team and he didn't do jack crap. Landry, not a big fan. I think he's old. He's slow. I'm not a big fan. MVS, look, this is a guy who all of a sudden, because he's a free agent now, and he's tall and he's fast. I get it. All of a sudden now, because he's a free agent, people are like, their mouths are watering over him. Well, why was he like a number 3, 4 receiver for the Packers if he was any good? If Rodgers thought he was any good, why couldn't he have been like a number 2? Why are they going out there and getting like Randall Cobb and stuff like that? So to me, he's very inconsistent catching the ball. If, people, when I reported about Robbie Anderson, people are like, oh, he's not that good, blah, blah, blah. But MVS, they're all excited about. Robbie Anderson, they're almost the same size, same speed. Robbie Anderson is way better than Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Yep. You don't have to give him a signing bonus. I would be happy with Robbie Anderson. The old guys, I don't want to have anything to do with, but I put them on there just as a joke because apparently Bill Belichick only signs 30-year-olds. But, yeah, I mean, Allen Robinson, Anderson, and then maybe Landry after that. Landry's a street free agent, so he wouldn't cost you anything, compensatory picks. Again, if the Patriots are trying to go the trade route, which protecting the compensatory picks for next year would help you, would give you more of an arsenal to do trades, which is maybe why they're aiming to protect the compensatory picks, because maybe that's the approach they're going with. We're like, oh, well, we're not going to do we did free agency for 1 year. Now we're going to do trades, and so we don't have to lay out signing bonuses and stuff like that. So Robinson, then Robbie Anderson for me.
Yeah, I'd be, I was more looking at the free agent guys. My bad. I mean, I like Robbie Anderson a lot. I think he could help this offense. So he would slide in ahead of Landry and Juju for me as well. AJ Green actually had a pretty good year last year in Arizona. Surprisingly, I thought he was washed. So
yeah,
we'll
for
see.
cheap,
cornerback.
For cheap, I would do him. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Cornerback. Gilmore's out there. Apparently, the Raiders are hot on him. The rest of the list that I have: Janoris Jenkins, Patrick Peterson, Joe Hayden, Kyle Fuller, Xavier Rhodes, AJ Bouye. Very old list. A lot of guys they're all on the backside of their career. If I had to pick one guy out of that, I would probably say AJ Bouye. That I think that, if you're looking for a veteran guy, along the same lines of Jalen Mills, but I think a little bit longer, a little bit better in man-to-man. I think that Bouye sort of gives you that option, but all those guys are somewhat similar. Jack Rabbit, Janoris Jenkins, decent, but outside of Gilmore, nobody's really good on that list.
I want nothing to do with Jenkins. I saw him get torched a number of times last year. I'll pass on him. Peterson's okay, but he can't stay healthy.
No.
Hayden, full.
Okay.
I'm actually I'm intrigued by Rhodes. If Rhodes could stay healthy, yep. I wouldn't mind that.
I agree.
It's really been an injury thing with him. Bouye, okay. I mean, I'd be fine with that. My favorite guy, if he's healthy, is obviously Gilmore, but I do feel like the Raiders might make a late push here. It's been pretty quiet around him, though. Let's move to edge. Zadarius Smith, who was released by the Packers, Melvin Ingram, Justin Houston, Jerry Hughes, Derek Barnett, and of course, when we look at Barnett, we talk about joint practices, Greg.
Yeah, I could just hear the other Patriots beat writers. They got a lot of intel from him from the joint practices. They saw him up close, and because it happens all the time. We know it happens all the time. The Patriots do joint practices with somebody pops, whatever. They played them they played Mack, the linebacker, with Cleveland this year. And he had a decent game. Terrence Mitchell played against the Patriots this year for the Texans, forced a fumble on Damian Harris. So, I've always liked Derek Barnett. I wouldn't say he's anything to write home about. I think Zadarius Smith, if there was one guy to go after for me, because it could be cheap, he's coming off an injury, that sort of thing. He played in Baltimore with Judon. It'd be nice to have those guys on opposite sides of each other. They're familiar with each other. All those guys bring something. Ingram, Houston, Hughes. I'm sure there are other guys out there. They all bring something and can bring you pass rush. It's just a question of how much cost.
I like Smith. Again, it's a health thing with him for the most part. He was making a lot of money for the Packers. They had to keep Devondre Campbell, who would have been one of my top guys at linebacker for the Pats. They had to bring him back. They had to bring Preston Smith back with more money. And obviously the Rodgers guy, gargantuan contract. So, defensive tackle, big guys up front. Akeem Hicks. Ooh, again, health, but I love.
Mm-hmm.
Can they make up for that mistake from years ago? They've got Akeem Hicks, Calais Campbell, Michael Pierce, who is now out there because Minnesota, they cut him. Yep. Sheldon Richardson, Daquan Jones, and Derek Nottie, who I know is from the Virginia area that I was working at for a long time. Yeah. So your thoughts on those names, Greg?
I like all those guys on the list. I mean, I would be fine with any of them, helping out. Obviously, people know, Hicks is one of the few guys that got away from New England, who was actually better or stayed as productive, if not better, when he left. Calais Campbell, can you imagine having him in the middle and quarterbacks having to throw over him? He's always been a beast. I love Michael Pierce. I loved him when he was with the Ravens. And the Ravens, I don't know if he was a free agent or trade, but good player, really good run stuffer. Same with Nandi. I mean, if they're looking to move on from Godchow, those two guys would be the guys that I would go after. Again, because Pierce is a street free agent, doesn't affect the compensatory pick formula, whereas Nandi, I think, would. So, I like that. It's a really good list. There are guys out there, and I think they're going to be cost effective. I think what we're seeing here, Nick, going through these names is that, fans might not love it, but there's some cost effective options out there that make the Patriots a little bit better.
Just feel like they got to recalibrate the fans after last year's spending spree.
Yeah.
This is more old school Belichick. And I think defensive line, especially as you just mentioned, all those guys, I think they could all chip in. I think they're all good players. And I wouldn't mind, Lawrence Guy, Godchow, if you move on from both those guys, save a little money and pick up a couple of these cats, not bad. Linebacker, Miles Jack, we both love. Leighton Vander Esch, Kaiser White, and Jayon Brown. What do you think?
Yeah, and I also had Anthony Walker on there from the Browns because it's just like, wouldn't it be typical if the Patriots took two Browns linebackers? Didn't they do that a few years ago with I forget.
He's gone. I think he signed this morning, I think.
Oh, he did? Okay, my bad.
Yeah, that's why I took him off the list.
Okay. But, we talked about Miles Jack. I think both of us in our dream scenario, Miles Jack is the new Mike linebacker for the Patriots.
Yes.
He would be awesome. I have no interest in Vander Esch. Decent player, gets hurt a lot, overrated. Kazir White is a good player, undersized, sort of like a coverage guy. I wouldn't mind him, in the room. But again, we can't forget they have Cam McGrone. Raekwon McMillan is probably similar to Kazir White in terms of, they had some big. They were looking for a big role for him last year. Unfortunately, he got hurt. But they have McMillan, they have and McRone come back. Big Mack linebackers, I guess. If we're going with Macmillan and Macrone. I'm very smart. I just came up with that on the fly. Yeah. Jayon Brown's another athletic sort of linebacker. Not crazy about him, but yeah, I think both of us want Miles Jack, but I think he's going to be pricey, and somebody with a little bigger wallet is probably looking to be like, boom, we have our new starting middle linebacker.
Yeah, Vander Esch, too many injuries, neck and head injuries, no thank you. And he also over pursues a lot. He's not that good in coverage. Not interested. Offensive line, Trey Turner, Nate Solder.
Yeah, I'm sure there are other guys out there. I haven't been keeping up. I do think, remember, the Patriots have a bunch of guys in-house, whether it's, Yasir Durant, Justin Herron, Yadni Kajust, who was their third-round pick that, I thought he showed flashes last year of being able to start at tackle. So they have options. So I don't think they're crazy looking right now outside of like a trade like the Lyle Collins deal that we talked about. But, Trey Turner's a veteran who's been out there, who's still a decent player. Nate Solder, you could probably get away with him as a right tackle at this point. I think his days of a left tackle are over, but he's always loved the area, always had a good relationship. Remember, his son went through a lot of health issues and dealt with the hospitals up here, so I'm sure they would be interested in that, possibly on the cheap. But, that's sort of where I see things.
All right, let's jump to the BostonSportsJournal.com member question of the day. $39.99 on the annual plan. You get all sorts of great stuff. How about them Bruins 10-1-1 in their last 12? Yeah, baby. And, of course, the Celtics playing really well.
Yep.
Tough game on Sunday. Refs hosed them with the Luka non-call, which was ridiculous. But you can also, of course, catch up with all your Patriots needs with Greg Bedard doing the coaches film during the season, weekly chats, all that good stuff.
And I will be doing coaching film on Mac Davis coming up. And Mack Wilson. I'll get these names. Mack Wilson, Terrence Mitchell. I'll be breaking down all these guys eventually, like once things settle down a little bit here.
Fantastic. Let's get to the question from Phoenix. Do you see Shaun Wade as someone that Belichick took time with last year so that he might be looked at to step up? We haven't seen him play, but could he be solid? Any chance that is part of Belichick's thinking, Greg?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the Patriots looked at, they needed more options at cornerback, with the Stephon Gilmore situation, and also with no one knew what the future was with J.C. Jackson. And they didn't draft a cornerback last year. Wade was in the draft last year. And so they looked at him as they went and got him as a prospect. And they don't know, and I don't know what he is capable of. I think they like him. He didn't earn a lot of time last year. They went with Miles Bryant, and that's fine. That's no indictment on him. But I think he is going, along with a lot of other people, I think Shaun Wade is going to be given every opportunity to win a starting job in camp. And people have to remember, the bottom line is with the Patriots, no matter who they add in free agency, they trade for, what have you, they have to earn it on the field here. And whether they play or not, whether they have a role or not, will be earned come May, June, and July and August on the practice field. And so Wade, yes, he will be given every opportunity to win a role right there along with Terrence Mitchell and Miles Bryant and Juwan Williams if he's still here and whoever else. But, yeah, I think he has potential. We'll see on the field.
I know this is very difficult for people, but I always say this every single offseason at this time. Be patient. We're not even into the new league year as Greg and I record this. A lot of things can happen. This is not the finished product. Be patient. I will criticize them from pillar to post if they continue to have this kind of an offseason. It's been underwhelming. I agree with Greg, as he said earlier on this pod. It's been underwhelming. They can't fix the coaching, which I will criticize because I just don't get it, especially on the offensive end. But let's see what they do. Let's see how all of this comes together. I mean, if they get Miles Jack or Allen Robinson or they trade for Lyle Collins, all these people that have been going crazy the last 24 hours will then have to, backtrack and apologize. So try to be patient. Let's see what they do. Of course, Greg and I will be all over it.